Hey everybody, welcome to the webinar. We're going to start in about 2 minutes. So just a heads up that you are in listen only mode. So if you are trying to talk, we can't hear you, but we did want to say welcome and we'll get started in just a few minutes. We're excited to have you all join us for tonight. So far we have 24 people on the call so far, so that's great. We expect a really full house tonight. Hey, again, I know folks are just starting to join, so we want to say welcome to the webinar. We're excited to have you all join us for this really important discussion. We're going to give people a few more minutes to join, and then we're going to get started. If you're new to GoToWebinar, just a reminder that everybody that comes on is on mute, and so we can't hear you. So if you do have something that you need to say or a question, feel free to raise your hand icon in the control panel, or you can type it into the questions box. But we're excited to have all of you join us, and we're going to start in just a few minutes. So that's a great question. So again, if you're just joining the webinar, welcome. We are excited to have you all for tonight's National JSA Thought Talk on the Never Again movement. If you're new to GoToWebinar or just joining and hearing this for the first time, everybody as you join is on mute so that we can eliminate a lot of the background noises as folks join. Once it's your turn to speak, if you've been chosen to be a speaker or you're a subsequent speaker or you raise your hand to be recognized, myself or one of the other moderators will unmute you so that the rest of the entire group can hear you. So once you've been called on to speak, we'll unmute you from our end, and then you can go ahead with your speeches or your comments. So that's a really great question that some of you have asked. And we will unmute each of the main speakers as your topic that you've been assigned to speak comes up. So we'll give an introduction, we'll unmute you, and then you can take it away. So those are really great questions, and we're going to start in 1 minute. We're going to start at 8:05 Eastern, so give people just another minute or so to join. But welcome. We're so excited to have you all. Also, if you're on the webinar and you're a main speaker, we'd like you to share your webcam. Like the four of us have ours up now. We'll minimize ours, and it'll give us a chance to not only hear who's speaking, but see you as well. So if you have access to a webcam and can share that with all of us, that'd be great. If you don't worry about it. It's okay. Low stress on that. But if you do have and are able to share, it'd be great to see you as you're speaking to us. We will be taking some speakers who have not been decided beforehand. We've left some time open to call on people on the spot. So just listen for when we'll do that. And if you would like to speak, you can raise your hand icon so that we know that you're ready to be recognized. And all of those speakers will have 90 seconds to make their point or ask a question or say what's on their mind. So yes, we will be taking people tonight who have not been decided beforehand. That's a great question. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. So Nick, you want to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the JSA National Never Again Thought Talk. My name is Nick Liang. I'm the Pacific Northwest Governor. I go to the International School of Bellevue, which is right outside of Seattle. Just some background, if you didn't already know, JSA, or the Junior State of America, we're an all-partisan organization that promotes civic education, and we really encourage students across the nation to engage in conversations like the ones we're about to have today. So just to kind of begin our conversation, I'm going to start off by giving a little history and some background on how the conversation around gun control and gun violence has evolved over time. So starting with Columbine High School shooting, which seriously shook the entire nation back when social media wasn't as big, and a lot of this information was coming from radio and TV news cycles. And it seriously garnered national attention, and kind of where the conversation of school shootings, specifically and gun violence in schools, erupted, moving on to shootings in places like Sandy Hook and Virginia Tech that garnered a lot of attention, where, you know, Sandy Hook was named Obama's one of his saddest days in office. And that kind of national attention has seriously continued this conversation on gun violence, and specifically gun violence in schools. And the most recent national attention grabbing was over in Parkland School District, where the conversation has erupted around student involvement. So this time, the conversation isn't just made by congressmen or the White House or adults. It's really about gathering the attention and the conversation around students, the people who are being affected by these legislation and policies. So starting with the attention of the Never Again hashtag, where students themselves are really continuing this conversation, organizing walkouts all across the nation in high schools, where students were going to their state capitals, talking to their administrations, having really productive conversations about how to make change in their local communities. And most recently, this past weekend, organizing the March on Washington and March for Our Lives organization and rallies all across the nation, where hundreds of thousands of citizens and students and activists were attending and voicing their opinion on this issue. And pass on to Ambika to introduce herself and also talk a little more.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ambika Sinha. I'm a senior for Marlboro High School for Marlboro, New Jersey, which is just an hour outside of New York City. So tonight, like Nick so kindly introduced, is all about making sense of what's been happening over the past month or so. So just real quickly, we're going to go over the three resolves that we're going to be discussing. So you have resolved the minimum age to purchase assault weapons and high capacity magazines be increased from 18 to 21. Resolved, arming teachers will make our schools safer. Resolved, youth demonstrations like the hashtag Never Again movement and the National School Walkout are effective forms of activism. And of course, we have our wrap up and sort of a conclusion of as the role of Junior State as a nonpartisan activism and debate organization, what we can do to make more sense out of the situation. I know the whole issue that we are discussing is so broad in topic, and so the three that we've narrowed down today is something that we'd all really like to just hone in on. So while there are so many other points that I know all of you are so well researched on and know so well, we would really like to have this conversation focused on the topics you see before you. So let's get into the first resolve. Resolve the minimum age to purchase assault weapons and high cartridge magazines be increased from 18 to 21. So as you see, this fun little graphics, it really shows how you put into perspective who's able to actually buy weapons that are capable of rapid destruction. So as we've seen in the past, especially Nicholas Cruz for the Parkland shooting was 19. Dylan Roof in the 2015 shooting in Emmanuel Methodist Church was also 19. The Sandy Hook shooter was 20 years old. There's a lot of question in society today of who actually is able or mature enough to possess these sort of weapons. So actually 60% of offenders who commit mass murders are at age 35 below, and 93% of offenders are at age 15 below. And so while 93% of the population are under the age of 50, we still have to take into regards the fact of 18 and 21, because as we've seen in the past, the amount of mass shootings are happening from individuals who are able to purchase these high-grade weapons. That number of deaths that number of murders that they commit spikes rapidly. So the way that we have tonight sort of organized is the main pro and con they'll get their chance to speak, as well as the sub pro and con. The main pro and con will have 4 minutes, and the subsequent speakers will have 90. Once you see my 2 minutes, you know you have 2 minutes left, and you hear the tap, you have 30 seconds left. And for the subsequent speakers, you'll hear just the tap for the 30 seconds and one for 1 minute left. So without further ado, let's get in.
Okay. Our first pro speaker is going to be Taylor Ellis from Texas. So Taylor, I'm going to unmute you. And if you're able to share your webcam, you can share that with us.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we sure can.
Okay, awesome. I would share my webcam, but I'm really getting over the flu, so I still look like I have the flu.
No problem.
But I still kind of wanted to be here tonight because I'm super excited to talk about it. And I do have a question. Are we able to answer questions? I don't know if that, like, if we can do that, or if we will be able to, if like people can ask us questions after our time has elapsed, or.
No, we're not gonna take questions. So it will just be the main speech followed by subsequent speeches, and then we'll do kind of a voting poll at the end of each of the topics.
Okay, awesome.
So 4 minutes are yours.
Awesome, thank you. All right, guys. Hi, I'm Taylor Ellis from Texas JSA. I'm the Texas Director of Activism, and I'm here to talk to you about the minimum age to purchase assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, which should be increased from 18 to 21. So, it's been 19 years, almost 19 years actually. Next month will mark 19 years since Columbine happened. And as many of you know, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold went into Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, and killed 13 of their classmates. And although it's been 19 years since the Columbine shooting, it is no longer one of the top 10 deadliest mass shootings in the United States, which is very alarming. As many of you also know, last month we had one of the most deadliest school shootings and mass shootings in the United States, where a 19-year-old former student of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School went into the high school and killed 17 of his former classmates and teachers, and wounded 17 others. Now, one thing that both these shooters have in common is that they both were under the age of 21 and killed other people with these assault weapons. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that over 70% of mass shootings are committed with an assault weapon or rifle that has a high-capacity magazine. So, in essence, you don't have a pistol that can shoot once or twice. You have something that can shoot multiple rounds at a time, injuring and most likely killing multiple people under a minute. Another thing that people don't realize is that Dylan Roof, who went into a Carolina church in 2015, also was under the age of 21 and used an assault weapon to kill people. And also the shooter at Sandy Hook, which a previous speaker mentioned, also was under the age of 21. Granted, these school shootings are not necessarily going to end because we raise the age, but one thing that we need to consider is that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed at age 18. According to BBC News, the prefrontal cortex, which is the cortex in our brain that is responsible for making most decisions, is actually fully developed at the age of 26. A lot of these shooters were not mentally stable, granted, but a lot of these reactions or these shootings were in reaction to bullying and the way classmates had treated them, and etc. And they reacted in a very irrational and emotional way and thought that rationalized pretty much killing their classmates. So I think the mental state and just the emotional background of kids at 18, it's not fully developed until you're 21. Another thing to think about is just the need for these weapons. Why do we need an assault weapon that can kill more than one person, 10 people in under a minute? There's not really a necessity to these weapons. But regardless of the reason why someone might want these weapons, we have to also just consider that we are not as developed mentally at the age of 18. And 4 of the 10 major shootings in the United States have been committed by someone who's under the age of 21. And so increasing this will just make it a little bit harder for people to get guns. And a lot of people say that we don't want to do that, but that doesn't infringe upon the Second Amendment, considering that the Heller case in 2008 deemed that the Second Amendment can be regulated and it can be amended for other laws. So you can regulate the type of arms that are bought in addition to who can and who cannot buy these weapons. And so I yield the rest of my time to the chair. Thank you.
Great. We will now move into the main con speech from Jack Anderson from Lake Forest High School in the Midwest. So Jack, I'm going to unmute you. Jack?
Hi, I'm Jack Anderson. Do you have the webcam working?
You click the little camera icon on your control panel?
I believe I did. That's okay though, as long as the volume's working. So hi, I'm Jack Anderson, and so this is a very important topic that we need to discuss. This is a national discussion, and this is something that will impact the future of all Americans, I think. So raising the minimum age for purchasing firearms may have prevented this most recent mass shooting. However, this action would infringe on the basic rights of Americans and would have done nothing to prevent other shootings. There are already millions of firearms out there for these criminals to obtain. They will find other methods to obtain these weapons, and for the following four contentions, that most mass shooters are older than 21, that with this you could vote and fight a foreign war but not exercise your Second Amendment right, and that raising the age won't prevent these people from obtaining guns, I urge you to join me in disagreeing with this resolution. So first and foremost, most of these perpetrators of these mass shootings are over the age of 21. We saw in Las Vegas the shooter was 64, in Blacksburg back in 2007 the shooter was 23, and in Aurora in 2012 the shooter was 30. In fact, the only shootings recently where the perpetrator was under 21 was in Newtown, Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and with Dylan Roof in Charleston. So raising the minimum age to buy a gun will only make it harder for law-abiding citizens between the age of 18 and 21 to exercise their Second Amendment right. After all, a right unexercised is a right lost. Raising the minimum age will do nothing to stop these horrendous shootings. We all know that here in the United States, our right to vote begins at the age of 18. If you can choose the leaders of our country but not be subject to the Bill of Rights, there's certainly a constitutional problem there in and of itself. Despite any concerns for national security and domestic tranquility the proponents of the resolution may have, restricting the rights of those under 21 is a direct infringement of the Second Amendment. Every single one of us has been, will be, or is 18 years old. Should this resolution be enacted, it will indeed affect every single one of us. And our Second Amendment right is a right that we should be grateful to have, as it is not something that other countries are blessed with. Third, with this resolution, an American can go overseas and risk his or her life for our country without being fully able to defend themselves back home. That is extremely unacceptable. Thousands of brave men and women between the ages of 18 and 21 are currently serving or have served in the military. When they when they're coming home from these operating these weapons in highly dangerous situations, they will not be able to purchase a gun to ensure their safety with this resolution. Veterans and active military are some of the most trustworthy people to have with these weapons, and even those distinguished individuals would not be able to exercise their rights should they be under the age of 21. Lastly, this resolution will not prevent criminals and mass shooters from obtaining these firearms. If someone has enough hatred in their heart to walk into a school and kill 17 people, a simple weapons ban is not going to stop them. The Florida shooter would have found some way to enact terror upon Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. After all, it is not the guns that kill these people, but it is the people, the murderers, that kill. Looking at the previous four contentions, that most mass shooters are older than 21, that with this resolution you could vote and fight a foreign war but not exercise your Second Amendment right, and that raising the age won't prevent these people from obtaining guns, I encourage you to say no to this kind of gun control proposed by this resolution. I yield my time to the chair.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jack. Our first subsequent pro speaker is Paige Few. Paige, are you on the call? Paige, I don't see you on the list. Is there somebody that would like to speak subsequent pro that has not been pre-assigned? If you do, you can raise your hand icon if there's somebody who would like to speak subsequent pro. Natasha, I saw you first. Natasha Salmi, I'm going to come to you to unmute you. Natasha, are you there?
Hi. Yes, hi.
Hey, you can go ahead. You have 90 seconds.
So I didn't really prepare anything, but I just want to address the point that it wouldn't necessarily prevent people from buying a gun and shooting people. I mean, this resolution is not just focused on school shootings in general. This could also be attributed to suicide. And it has been shown that if you have ways of preventative methods of making it more difficult to obtain a weapon, in fact, can prevent people from shooting themselves. So I think we could do everything in our power to make it more difficult for people to obtain weapons, especially if they're considering suicide, because and perhaps raising the minimum age to purchase weapons can do that. Additionally, I'd like to say that you should also prevent people from not acting on impulse again in the case of school shootings. Right now, it's super easy to just walk into any store and just purchase a gun. And if we raise the minimum age to purchase assault weapons, we could prevent a lot of school shooters from acting on the impulse of just walking into a store and deciding to do it and not have to think about it, because then they don't have to go out of their way to purchase a gun. Additionally, even though I think the way that legislation works in this country is that we see an issue and then we address it. And if there's been multiple instances of school shooters being under the age of 21, I think we should absolutely make it a priority to at least attempt having a ban on the purchase of assault weapons and high capacity magazines. I mean, we may not know for certain what might happen, and there are many debates about what could happen, but I think we should try to, for example, we banned Kinder eggs. Like, if we ban Kinder eggs because we heard of one instance of a kid dying, I think we can do a similar thing here and at least attempt to prevent people from the ages of 18 to 21 from committing a school shooting. Thank you. I yield my time to the chair.
Thanks, Natasha. That was great. I also think that our con speaker has not yet joined us. So is there anybody that would like to speak to the con side of this resolution? I put everybody's hand down, so if you'd like to speak subsequent con. Nikhil, I'm coming to you. Nikhil from, I think, New Jersey.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, so I'm Nikhil. I go to Biotech High School, and so I think that raising the minimum age to buy these high capacity guns should not be increased from 18 to 21. First of all, one of the main reasons why we should be able to have the right to have these types of weapons is to protect yourselves in case something happens, such as many younger people, especially from the ages of 18 to 21, might not be great shooters. So if they were to have someone come into their house, someone trying to harm them with a regular weapon, such as a pistol, they may not be able to protect themselves. But with these high-capacity magazines and assault weapons, they are much better equipped to protect themselves. Secondly, I want to address a point that one of the sub-con speakers mentioned, that this would prevent suicides. I really haven't heard of anyone taking their life with a high-capacity magazine. They usually do it with something like a pistol or something of that sort. So I don't think that this would help decrease the rate of suicides. And yeah, I think my time's almost up. So I'll yield my time to the chair.
All right, great. Thanks, Nikhil. Let me make sure. Do I have anybody that wants to speak, and probably take one or two more on each side? Do I have anybody that wants to speak in the pro or address something that they've heard? Zachary Roberts, coming to you. So, Zachary, you should be unmuted.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Zachary Roberts. I'm from West Academy in Massachusetts, now outside of Boston. I believe that gun control should not, that the age should be higher for to be able to obtain assault rifles. And in my true opinion, as an immigrant living in this country for the past 5 years, I do believe that this is a serious problem that should be addressed. Coming from Europe, I have grown up in a place where seeing a gun has never happened before. And now I can go to a store just to get some new sports equipment and see guns on shelves. So this is a completely foreign concept to me. And the last school shooting that's happened in Europe was before I was even born in 1996. And after that, high gun control was put in place in United Kingdom where this happened. And I've heard lots of points about being able to protect oneself and all that. And as an immigrant living in this country, I cannot own a gun. So if everyone else has a gun and I do not, I am even less protected. So that's a very selfish reason for me. But also that we should all accept that we come from the same base, that people that want guns believe that they have to protect themselves, whilst people that are against guns think that the government should be protecting everyone. So all of this argument, we are all on the same base, that we need to be secure and be able to live in a safe place where we can all cherish our safety and security and have the right to pursue happiness. But we all disagree on how to pursue that. So that all revolves around our faith in our government. And as my roots would say, I've seen the government be able to intervene and work. So in my humble opinion, I believe that gun control should be highly enforced, and I will support any gun control legislation. Thank you. Here my time. This chat.
Thank you so much, Zachary. I appreciate that perspective. Do I have anybody that wants to speak on the con side? And you can just raise your hand icon and I can unmute you. Norma, I think this is the side you were wanting. Norma, are you there? Norma Farrell?
Hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
So I would just like to begin by saying that I am for legislating gun control and increasing gun control, but I do not think that the best way to do this is by raising the age from 18 to 21. I think that dealing with gun control by raising the age gives us as youth less leverage in dealing with this, because we're saying that we cannot handle ourselves around assault weapons and high capacity magazines. Already with the movements like the March for Our Lives movements, we're already being criticized as immature and as not being able to deal with the consequences of the actions of others by saying that, okay, let's raise the minimum age from 18 to 21. We're putting ourselves in an even worse position. We're not dealing with the true root of these actions, which is the fact that we are allowed to purchase semi-assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. in order to really deal with the problem and like really get at the heart of it, we need to legislate it for everyone, not just 18 to 21. I don't think that there's a huge difference amount of reasoning that an 18-year-old has from a 20 to a 21-year-old. This is kind of like a band-aid solution. This isn't going to really help legislate guns. This isn't going to save lives as much as more regulation would. And even more than that, it would really lose leverage for us, because we'd be saying, yes, okay, we as teens, as young adults, can't trust ourselves to assault weapons, but you can trust us with the legislation, which to me seems a little ridiculous. I yield my time to the chair.
Thank you. We can do, I think we've got time for one more round of subsequent. So is there anybody that wants to speak to this issue on the pro side? Ryan Balance, I'm going to come to you. Ryan, you there?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay. So basically, I'd just like to point one thing out in this resolve. It's so that already certain states, including the District of Columbia and New Jersey, have passed bills that do, in fact, ban assault weapons. And I think while I am a proponent of the Second Amendment, I do personally feel that there comes a limit to what someone would individually need to protect themselves. Although I do say, yes, military people are authorized, they should handle a weapon, but certain things like assault weapons, bump stocks, they're made for scenes of war. I think there's a limit to what people physically need a weapon for, which is to protect themselves. And I think by increasing the minimum age to 18 to 21, we're going to set a precedent into society where we realize, hey, maybe we don't need assault weapons necessarily to, protect ourselves and use the Second Amendment properly. Maybe it's just a handgun that can do the job. Because I personally feel like I keep asserting assault weapons, they're made for military grade, police force, law enforcement. It's not necessary for an ordinary citizen like us to possess this weapon to protect ourselves. I believe there are other ways, and by increasing the age from 18 to 21, I think we can generally set a precedent and say, you know what, there is room to change. So, and with that, I'd like to yield the rest of my time to the chair.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. And do we have a main con speaker? Anybody want to wrap us up on the con side of this? Oh, hold on. Let me ask again. Sorry, I didn't put hands down. Does anybody want to speak con on this? Jillian Dukes, I'm coming over to you. 1 second. Jillian, are you there?
Yes, am I unmuted?
Yes. Oh, Julian, I'm sorry. Julian Dukes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, like I said, I'm Julian Dukes. I'm from Oregon, and I'm kind of concerned about how a lot of these laws seem to be reactionary to whatever incident happened directly before the discussion. I mean, for example, right after that one with the guy who was on the no-fly list, we talked about banning assault weapons for people on the no-fly list, and now when there's a shooter in the age range of 18 to 20, we talk about moving the age up. And I think honestly we should focus on what policies actually make sense as opposed to what policies necessarily would have stopped the previous shooting. And I think that raising the age really doesn't make sense, because an 18 to 20-year-old is in fact an adult, or at least we seem to have decided so as a society. The agreed upon threshold tends to be 18 years old, and it's pretty culturally ingrained in our society. So we ought to be asking ourselves whether something too dangerous, like an assault weapon, for all adults 18 to 20 would really be safe for any adult at all, and should we be using age as the criteria? And honestly, age is just not a good criteria for this. It's sort of needlessly discriminatory. Of course, some discrimination based on age is okay, not letting children drive cars, but it should be avoided wherever possible. So rather than sort of arbitrarily discriminating based on age, I would like to see something like more background checks, requirement of training, or honestly, I would like to see a reinstatement of the federal assault weapons ban, but using age as a criterion just doesn't make any sense. Yield my time to the chair.
Great. And I'm going to actually break a little bit of protocol and come back to the main speakers for 1 minute each to kind of wrap us up, maybe address some of the points that have been brought up. So you'll each get 1 minute just to kind of, again, reiterate your main points or bring up anything that was discussed, and then we'll come to Stuart for our poll on this, and then we'll move to our next issue. So Jack, I'm coming to you, and then Taylor, back to you, and then we'll be done with this one. Jack, are you there?
It's scary though.
Jack? can hear you.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I was having dinner. Is this a closing speech?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a very important issue that we all need to take note of. Raising the minimum age to buy the weapons is not going to prevent a multitude of these shootings. We can absolutely look at other solutions to this problem, but this really wouldn't go very far beyond the most recent shooting, and this is definitely something that would infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. It would make a lot of people very angry, and there's plenty of law-abiding citizens from the ages of 18 to 21 that would benefit that would not benefit from this resolution.
Great, thanks, Jack. And Taylor, we're going to come back to you. Taylor?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I just wanted to kind of address some points that were made by the con sides. One said that it would be infringing upon our Second Amendment rights, but if you look at the DC versus Heller case back in 2008, it says that the Second Amendment is up for regulation and you can regulate it. Also, passed by the Fourth Circuit in DC earlier in 2017, it did say that assault weapons are not protected under the Second Amendment. We have to think about the context in which the Second Amendment was written. The Second Amendment was written when African Americans were considered 3/5 a person, and they had muskets that only shot one person every 5 minutes. So not only did the Supreme Court rule that it can be regulated, it also was written at a time where we didn't have 21st century weapons. Also, we need to think about it's people said that you can get it. You don't just have to buy it like legally. You can get it illegally. But just because people can go off and shoot somebody, we don't make murder legal, right? We don't want to make it easier for people to get the weapon, especially if they're likely to go up and shoot a school. Second, someone said it's the best way to protect themselves, but there are very few cases, if any, instances of people actually protecting themselves with an invader coming into their home with a semi-automatic assault rifle. Also, people said this isn't the best way for gun control, and I completely agree. I think that we should have more background checks, but I do think this is a way to show that the government is passing different laws for this. If anything, Florida just passed a law a few weeks ago that raised this age, so this is a start to something new. In addition, President Trump, who is probably one of the more conservative leaders of our country, who upholds the Second Amendment, who's even supported by the NRA, was in favor for raising this age. So when we have the president who's in favor of it and is the leader of a party that is mostly for the gun protection, we have to consider why that might be. Last but not least, well, actually, I think I hit all the points that I really wanted to. So thank you. And I'm almost out of my time anyway.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. Stuart? Oh, Stuart, you're on mute.
Great job to all the speakers who spoke on this resolution. I'm going to throw up a poll, and we're just going to vote on the resolution that was just discussed. So as we move into the next subjects, take a couple of minutes or just a couple seconds to vote on how you feel about this resolution. Either you vote in the pro of the resolution or the con of the resolution. And we'll just keep this up for about 10 more seconds. So if you haven't voted, go ahead and do so.
Everybody's welcome to vote.
Encourage.
And if you didn't get to speak and you have thoughts, you can, again, you can add that to the question section, and we can kind of capture some of the questions and the comments that we didn't have a chance to get to in some of the wrap up that we do after this. So if we didn't get to you, but you do have something to say, feel free to put in the questions box so we have it moving forward.
All right, so I'm going to close this. So any last minute choices, go now. All right, I'm closing it.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next resolve. So just again, great job, everyone.
Really quickly, we've got the, sorry to interrupt you, Mbika, but I just wanted to share the results. So it looks like we're actually at about 70% pro and 30% con. So just kind of something to think about.
All right, so that's very interesting. So let's move on to the next resolve. So here we have is resolved. Arming teachers will make our schools safer. So just another bit of background on this issue. As we've seen recently, the sort of response that a lot of people, especially politicians like Donald Trump, have been saying is that maybe the best way to stop shootings is to actually arm teachers and administrators in the school to sort of neutralize a situation as it's happening. So as you see on this graph, I actually thought this one was pretty interesting because the percentage of Democrats and Republicans, you have something more broad as preventing mentally ill from purchasing guns, about the same. But when you see a very big deviation, when you break into the party lines of if you're allowing teachers and officials to carry guns in schools or not. So that sort of is, I think, a new concept that's been introduced in our political sphere. And that's, of course, something we're going to debate. And another thing I wanted to bring up is the Stop School Violence Act that's been sponsored by Senator Hatch, and it's already passed in the House as recent as a little over 2 weeks ago, I believe. And so as you see, a very, very big part of this act is centered around state-based grants. So each state would kind of determine where that training for everyone would go, where the improvements and the developments to operate schools and make assessments about school safety would happen. It's something that is one of the, as we see tragedies like these happen, it's one of the first responses that our Congress has made to remedy the issue. But it's also something that is, of course, in the works as it will face debate in the Senate. So let's get started on this resolve.
Okay, we're going to come to our main pro speaker that arming teachers would keep or would make schools safer. So that's Jared Kern. I'm from Southern California. Jared, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
All right. Is it possible for me to turn on the camera?
Yeah, you just hit your camera icon and we should be able to see you.
Where is it?
On the control panel. On your panel, so it's the microphone one, and then underneath that, it's a little camera icon.
Oh, I don't see it. Oh, that's unfortunate. That's all right. All right. It's unfortunate. I really want to talk about Taylor's one of her last points, but I got to get going on this, so we'll go ahead and get started. So, when we look at domestic terrorist attacks, such as like mass shootings, like the one in Vegas, or like the school shootings in Columbine, Sandy Hook, and recently Parkland, we see how long it takes for police to respond to the shooting. According to CNN, in Columbine, 12 students were fatally shot 13 minutes to the first 911 calls, and it took 47 minutes for the SWAT team to arrive after the gunfire erupted. The shooters already killed themselves by that time. It took 20 minutes for police to respond to the Sandy Hook massacre. Again, the shooter already killed themselves. According to the U.S. News, the Vegas shooter was blasting 200 rounds in a hotel hallway 6 minutes prior to the attack on the crowds below. Police didn't respond immediately when workers said someone was shooting in their upper floors either. According to the Sun Centennial, a half an hour after the Parkland shooter fled, police thought they were watching him through the cameras, but the video images were delayed, so they were far behind his trail. Clearly, police response times are not as fast enough when we look at atrocities like this. This is why arming teachers would be a way to possibly prevent and essentially mitigate these horrific types of atrocities from happening again. In regards to a counter argument such as police response at the Maryland school shooting, first of all, not all campuses have cops, but all of them have teachers. Secondly, the Parkland school officer did not respond immediately. Lastly, the reliance of one or two campus police may not be enough, so the more people armed against a threat, the more safe and protected a school is. According to the FBI, there were 160 instances like the ones I'm mentioning from 2000 to 2013, with a total of 486 killed and 557 wounded in these events. I cannot confirm that all of these were school shootings, but in the instance that they were and teachers were armed, it's a good question to ask if those numbers would fluctuate. Even before President Trump suggested the idea of arming teachers, many school districts around the country already had the policy implemented. For instance, The Hanover School District in Colorado voted to allow teachers to carry guns on campus. The reason and justification behind it is that their schools are 30 miles southeast of Colorado Springs, and it takes an average of 20 minutes for police to respond. Of course, it shouldn't just be rural school districts arming teachers either. There are also cases like Vegas in the large urban setting where an armed individual can stop somebody much quicker than waiting for police. Of course, the option to be armed is voluntary, and a teacher who wishes to be armed should be properly trained and prepared for any situation that occurs. A school district in Oklahoma that put in the arming teachers policy uses it mainly as a deterrent to lower the likeliness of an attack. Arming teachers is not the only method, but a good method that can be used by itself or on par with things such as metal detectors or increased security. One thing is for sure, however, there has never been a school shooting at a school with armed teachers, and it will probably stay that way, keeping us alive and earning our education. Thank you, and I yield my time to the chair.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really great. Laura Sanchez, we're going to come to you next for the main con speech. Laura, can you unmute yourself and start?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so I'm Laura and I'm from Coral Springs in Florida. I'm going to explain why I'm against arming teachers to make our schools safer. First of all, it's not what teachers want. Teachers want to focus on teaching. They don't want to be armed. They shouldn't need to be sharpshooters or be prepared to go up against an AR-15. They already have enough on their plate. When you have seconds to act, when you hear the code for an active shooter, is a teacher supposed to use those seconds getting their guns instead of getting their students to safety? Those are words from the president of the National Federation of Teachers, questioning Trump's proposal. Then, it really makes things more dangerous. The guns teachers carry could be taken away and turned against them, or used on the wrong people. Having guns in school or classrooms could lead to them ending up in the wrong hands. Almost any two students could figure out a way to get a gun away from a teacher. One distracts them, and the other one thinks to wrestle the gun off of them. Or if the teacher keeps it in a safety cage, the teacher might not have time enough to get it and shoot back. Last, armed teachers could make things harder for first responders. It would be difficult for police responding to a school shooting to distinguish between gunfire from school shooters and armed staff shooting back. And it's questionable whether the staff shooting back will be proficient enough not to injure bystanders or first responders, potentially killing innocent people. Alex Schachter was a 14-year-old who died because of the Stoneman Douglas shooting. Just like the other 16 people who died that day, his death could have been prevented. The shooter never entered Alex's classroom. If the doors and windows had just been bulletproof, Alex and many others could still be alive today. It is the government's job, not the teacher's job, to improve school safety, with things like bulletproof windows and doors, more school security guards, gun regulations, mental health research programs, and early detection of potential dangerous individuals. The NRA is trying to distract our attention with arming teachers as a response to mass shootings, when massive shooters should have never gotten their guns to begin with. There's no reason why a 19-year-old kid should legally get an AR-15 and shoot 17 people in a school, or a 20-year-old with mental problems to also legally obtain a Bushmaster SM-15 and shoot 20 kindergarten kids in Connecticut. Let's be proactive, not reactive. Let's stop mass shootings from happening instead of finding a solution from when it's already too late, when the shooting has already started. And making it financially profitable to be an armed teacher makes me question the ethics behind it. Arming teachers only gives a false sense of safety when it brings more danger into the situation. You can't solve the problem of gun violence with more guns. We are students who are important and we have a voice. That's why I strongly encourage all of you to vote against arming teachers to make our schools safer, to not let things like the Stoneman Douglas shooting happen again more easily, to not endanger our schools even more. And I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Laura. And we have a main subsequent pro, but I don't think that he's on. Andy Lee, are you on? I don't see your name in the attendee list. So is there a student who wants to speak? Is there a student who wants to speak main pro? Pro army teachers will make our schools safer. Let's see, Shaky Merritt, I'm coming to you. You can unmute yourself.
Hello, my name is Shaky Merritt. I go to Dwight Malcolm's Englewood in New Jersey. I'm part of Dwight Malcolm's Englewood JSA Mid-Atlantic State. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. That was a great introduction. Thanks.
Okay, so I believe arming teachers would stop mass shootings in America due to many reasons. Our school currently does not arm teachers, but many teachers have volunteered to be armed. And I believe that, like many people have said, the timing that it takes for police officers and dispatchers to actually dispatch the police to the scene, it's just not okay due to the fact that many students do die in this case. And I believe that within arming teachers, many students will not just have their life saved. Many students will feel safe. I personally would feel safe if I had someone in my school armed, such as a teacher, due to the fact that I know that if somebody did come to a school, he would know that we had 7 armed teachers, 8 armed teachers, and I believe he would think twice before shooting up my school in particular. So I believe arming teachers in America would do us a service, but I think there should be only certain teachers armed within the school. Not every teacher should be armed, only certain teachers who have the training and have the skills and are willing to do it. Because I know certain teachers are not willing to do it. And I wouldn't want somebody to be forced to do something that they're not willing to do. I yield my time to the chair.
Thank you. That was a great point. Appreciate that. And our main con, we have Dylan Conrad. Oh shoot, Dylan, you were on here, but I don't see you anymore. Okay, maybe he'll come back and we can come back to him. Is there anybody who wants to speak main con? Matthew Scholar, I'm coming. Let's see. Matthew, I'm trying to. Matthew, can you unmute yourself? Let's see. Matthew, I can't figure out how to unmute you, so we'll work on that and then we'll come back to you for the next round. So Sam Campisi, I'm coming over to you. Sam, are you there?
Yeah. Okay. So the ease of access to guns correlates clearly to the number of gun deaths and mass shootings that occur. So this is a fact, and it's backed by evidence, and I really don't see the point of denying it. The only way to stop or reduce this issue is to regulate weapons, and whether that means creating stricter gun laws or controlling or banning assault weapons, the answer is limiting the ability of people to kill others with guns. And giving teachers guns just adds more weapons to that equation, and more guns results in more gun deaths, and I think it's really as simple as that. And I really appreciate that the pro side has acknowledged that teachers who don't feel comfortable using weapons shouldn't have to. And I don't think that people who aspire to grow up to educate children should need to be forced as a part of their job description to be comfortable using a weapon against another person. And if you're willing to arm teachers because mass shootings can happen in schools, I don't see where you draw the line. Like, after that, are you supposed to arm anybody who works in a public place where a shooting can happen? So does that mean arming waiters in restaurants and people who work in stores at malls and everybody who works in a public place? Does that mean everybody who walks around has the possibility of experiencing a shooting so that every single person who walks around should carry a gun? So I really think it's as simple as more guns equals more gun deaths. I don't think students feel comfortable in an environment where their teachers are carrying guns. So I don't think that it makes schools safer. I think it makes them more dangerous.
All right, yeah. Thanks very much, Sam. Thank you. Do we have anybody who, let me put these down. Do we have anybody that wants to speak pro? Arming teachers will make our schools safer. Avanin, I'm coming over to you.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Avneen. I am a sophomore at the Middlesex County Academy. I live about 40 minutes outside of New York. And I feel like when we look at this resolve, we should look at the resolve from an overall perspective. And I feel that arming teachers in our schools will make it safer, not when there's an active shooter situation present, but it will act more as a deterrent before shootings. And I feel that this is important because if there are students that know their teachers can possibly react to an act of violence that they're planning, they would feel discouraged to actually carry it out. And furthermore, I understand how on the con side of this argument, there's a lot of, feeling for teachers that their responsibility is to teach and they shouldn't have a burden of carrying a gun. And I completely agree with that. I actually have a lot of relatives who are teachers and they're con on this, but what I tell them is that as a teacher, it's your responsibility to teach, but also keep our students safe. And you can do that in measures you feel possible. And if you don't want to carry a gun, you don't have to carry a gun. But in an overall perspective, I feel that arming teachers will make our schools safer and act as a deterrent. And, in situations where an active shooter, you hear the active shooter, oh, is that my time? No? Oh,
No,
sorry.
you're good.
But, okay, so in like situations where you hear an active shooter alert, I'm just going to bring up the Parkland situation here. This student, he pulled the fire alarm so students would run out into the hallways. And, in a situation like that, there's nothing anybody can do if you had a gun or would not have a gun. So I feel like using that as an example in this situation wouldn't really apply. And I just feel like it would act as an overall deterrent. Thank you. Yield my time to the chair.
Great. Thank you so much. We're going to come back to our two main speakers, I think. Ambika, does that sound good to keep us on time? We'll come back to the two main speakers to wrap us up, and then we'll do another poll on this issue. So, Laura, we're going to come back to you, and then Jared, back to you. Laura, are you there?
Yes. So just to wrap up, I just wanted to acknowledge that it's not only the teachers who will feel uncomfortable carrying out guns, but it's also the students who will feel uncomfortable knowing that some of their teachers are carrying out guns in their schools. Because more guns, as the con side has acknowledged, brings more gun death. So it only adds up more danger into the situation. So the pro side has said that there's not been any mass murder with armed teachers, but the problem is that there's never been armed teachers in any schools, and if there were armed teachers, it will only increase. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Great, thank you so much. And then Jared, we're going to come right back to you to wrap us up. Jared?
Hi, I'm back. All right, so there's a couple points that I wanted to bring up. I think, let's see. Somebody was talking about how, in regards to teachers, what's next, like teachers and then like people that live in that work in public places and whatnot. And as I said before in what I was saying, it is an option to carry, so it's like I said, it's not forced. So kind of using that, like using what I was saying to, I guess I'm sorry, I'm not a very good improv speaker, excuse me. Using what I'm just gonna go to the next point. I'm sorry. The next point was talking about how everybody should be, like, I heard everybody should be carrying a gun, like, just to protect themselves from things. And yeah, that's the Second Amendment right. That's that's from the Constitution of the United States. It's a God-given right for Americans to be able to bear arms and protect themselves. And it's laws and legislations that sort of keep safe spaces per se. You could say it, to protect, like, to keep gun-free zones. But that's all legislation and whatnot. If you get rid of all that, I mean, Second Amendment still applies at the end of the day. And one person, I believe, was saying that not only will teachers be uncomfortable, but students will be uncomfortable, et cetera, et cetera. You can't factually prove that. So that's just one point that I like to bring up, because that's sort of opinionated. And the last point that I saw, I think it was Laura, she said, there's no schools in the United States that have armed teachers. Well, no, in my speech, I clearly said that there are teachers that are armed in Oklahoma, Colorado, Texas. There's over 100 districts in Texas that actually have armed teachers. So that's factually incorrect. There are armed teachers. So yeah, that's all I'd like to say, and I yield my time to the chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Stuart, do you have another poll for us?
Yep. All right, so we're going to throw up the next poll. Same drill. right, so you should see the quick poll. Resolved arming teachers will make our schools safer. You can either vote pro on this resolution or you can vote con on this resolution.
I thought they were really great points brought up on both sides of this issue. I think everybody was really knowledgeable, and I appreciate everybody's discussion points here. This is definitely a topic that has been in the news recently, and a lot of folks in Washington weighing in on this on both sides as well.
Yeah, and a lot of you made points that I hadn't thought of yet either, so enlightening for me. All right, so I'm going to close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, and we've got about 20% that voted pro on this resolution and 78% that voted con.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so I'm going to help us transition into our next resolution, which reads, resolved youth demonstrations like the hashtag neveragain movement and the National School Walkout are effective forms of activism. Just to give a little bit of background, I don't know if Stuart can pull up the slide with the 2 photos and the graphic.
It's up. It's up.
Oh, it's up. Great. So on the right, as you can see, is a snap map. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of what that is, but basically it's a map on Snapchat that allows people using the app to see what kind of events are going around in the local area and actually all across the world. And kind of what you're seeing is walkouts all across the New York area, but if you were to look at it on a nationwide level, those things were popping up all over the place. Which kind of goes to show the kind of use of social media, especially with youth demonstrations, with hashtags, social media, the way that the word gets out and how these rallies and marches and walkouts are organized are well put together on a youth level, really using all the resources that are available to organizers. And on the left, as you can see, a bunch of students with signs. With the March for Our Lives this past weekend, almost all the speakers were from high school students in all for the March on Washington. It was like Emma Gonzalez, and survivors from actual real school shootings. So really focusing this attention on youth demonstrations. And walkouts in high school is also organized by high school students. So I'm excited to hear what our main speakers and our subsequents have to say on the effectiveness of youth demonstrations. And with that, I think we're going to start off with our main pro, Adria Sarkar. I didn't mess that up.
Adria, are you there? We can hear you. Well, I think. Audrita? I see you have your hand. Yep, can you hear us? It looks like you're not muted. Are you there? Let's see, there's a question. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. I'm not sure if your audio is working, if you're dialed in on the phone, but you're unmuted. Are you there? Okay, why don't we go, we're gonna kind of mix up protocol. Why don't we go to the main con? So Alexander Walton, we're gonna come to you. Audrita, why don't you try to dial in again, and then we'll come back to you. So we're just gonna flip-flop the order a little bit. We can do that, it's okay. So Alexander Walton, we're gonna come to you. One second. Hold on, Alex. Alex, can you unmute yourself and then let us know that you're here?
Hello?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're gonna let you take it away on the con side of resolve youth demonstrations like the Never Again movement and the National School Walkouts are effective forms for activism.
Okay, so I can just go ahead.
You can just go ahead.
All right. So this the national movement, obviously, within the First Amendment, the right to petition the government and overall self-expression is very important, and it's vital to the American spirit. However, I'm very uncomfortable with the just kind of the dishonesty that has come out of the movement. There's a sentiment that it was promulgated principally by the kids, which is just not correct. It was planned entirely out of the Women's March group. Much of the language and the sentiment, I don't recall the young lady that has her head shaved, but she posted a video of her ripping the Constitution in half. David Hogg is constantly cursed at politicians and used abrasive language. This is just not conducive to real results and being fair to all sides. And there are many people that have founded opinions on the very difficult issue of gun rights. And I would say further, I don't think walking out for 17 minutes really was effective in their goal. I feel that it was very divisive in many schools due to the monopolization of the debate. It was not a forum for all sides. It was principally out of one extreme viewpoint. So for all the foregoing reasons, I feel that the Never Again movement is not an effective form of activism, and I give the rest of my time to the chair.
I'm just gonna break protocol. Whatever. Do you want to give a follow up on what you think might be effective forms of activism or effective forms for change?
In terms of activism or
Sure.
for legislation?
Either one.
Okay. So activism, I feel what would be most important is I wasn't against the March for Life. I'd want to make that clear. I was more speaking about actions within schools, which I didn't love. I feel that it would be better to speak with your legislators directly, mail, write, if you want to collectivize with students of your like mindset. And yes, petition the government. I think that would be more conducive to results that we could all agree and appreciate. That's our deliberation in democracy. I don't think you should walk out of school and I would also advise people with those mindset. I don't think they're bad or anything, but just to try and stick their hand out to the other side. You know, if you're in California as if you're in California or if you're in New York City in a loft with a doorman and you live on the 5th floor, you may not need a gun. You don't even think about that. But if you live in, you know, the sticks of Georgia, you're going to want a gun. Or if you live in the mountains in, you know, you live real high up in Arizona somewhere, you know, there could be a javelina trying to attack your dog. You may want a gun. So we all lived in a skewed reality, so we should take that into consideration. And with respect to legislation, I think the individual right to gun ownership is really, really, really important. As we've seen with police brutality, you know, there are tanks in Ferguson. The police are not always the most responsive, especially to minority communities, and they also are not great defenders of civil liberties, whether that be the federal government or that's the police. That's something we have to take into account. The idea that should the government confiscate all these weapons, we will be safer is something I don't believe. We have people shouting, Jews will not replace us. Do you think this is the time you don't want guns? So I would hope that everyone considers that. But I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time, but that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate that perspective. And Audrey, we're going to come back to you. Let's see if the audio is working. Can you hear us?
Yep, I can. Can you guys hear me?
Awesome. Yeah, we can hear you. We're coming to you for the main pro.
Right. Columbine, Virginia Tech, Oakland, Sandy Hook, and now Parkland. Usually these schools get their 15 minutes of fame and then they fade into the background as another statistic. But the Never Again movement is different because this time the Parkland high schoolers are taking this narrative and turning it on its head. They're making the story impossible to ignore. By taking to social media and protesting in the streets, they've made this gun control debate more mainstream. They put this gun control debate in the spotlight, and this momentum has caused school walkouts and marches, and there will be more in the future. It has also inspired many students to write to their representatives, which is considered one of the most productive forms of activism, and it has created an unprecedented amount of media coverage. Even though these students cannot vote, they've inspired many others to vote, and they've called for many policy changes. They've had more media support than other movements such as Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter is often criticized by the media and Never Again is not criticized as much. That gives Never Again more movement and room to impact the current political discussion in our country. After the Parkland shooting, many walkouts and protests have been organized. I'm sure many of you have heard of or participated in the National School Walkout that was just 2 weeks ago. These events have carried on the discussion on gun control, forcing everyone, not just politicians, to no longer ignore this issue. This movement has gained attention online, especially on Twitter, and it's keeping this gun debate in the public eye, especially after normally these issues fade into the background. The Parkland students have even spoken at their state capitol just a week after their shooting, though they didn't get the reaction they had hoped for. They pleaded talked to Florida lawmakers to change the laws, but I wasn't that successful. But because of this Never Again movement, it has gained national attention. Schools across the country have been protesting, writing to the state legislators, and hopefully state by state these laws will change. Never Again has inspired a generation of students to take control of their life and speak out against rampant gun usage and gun violence. Though it's too soon to see where the March for Our Lives will lead, which was just 2 days ago. Hopefully it'll have much more of an impact on policy. It has also had an huge impact on the American public. It has swayed people who are previously neutral on this issue, and many politicians and celebrities are speaking out on this aspect of American life, which has been unfortunately normalized. The Never Again movement has been successful, and I hope will continue to facilitate this level of political discourse in our country. I yield my time to the chair.
Great, thank you so much. So we're just going to move right into subsequent so we can get in as many as we can. So Christian Martin, coming to you.
All right, so you can hear me?
Yep.
Sweet. So my name is Christian Martin. I'm from Princeton High School right smack in the middle of central Jersey, about an hour outside of Philly, outside of New York. So I think that I'm obviously pro on this resolution. I think that what Audrija just said pretty much sums up my case entirely, that I think the point of these walkouts, the point of these rallies, these marches, is that what they've done is they've kept gun control in the national dialogue. And I think that's so critical, in that we aren't letting politicians, we aren't letting the media, we aren't letting the country forget and just kind of move on. We're saying, we're not going to quit. We're going to make our voices heard. We're going to make sure that we don't let this go until there's actual change. Because I think that's the problem, is that too often, there's a big stir and then kind of people let it go away. And that's how we see gun control and all these movements fail. But I think more than that, they're effective forms of activism in that they show that, I think our generation in particular is kind of knocked on a lot because, younger people don't vote as much. Younger people are less involved in politics. I think it shows that we are paying attention and that we are going to make sure our voices are heard, and that we really are demanding, the attention that I think we as American citizens we have a right to from our politicians. So with that, I'll yield my time to the chair.
Great. And I don't think Kaylin Gore, our main con speaker, is on the call right now. So if I have a main, or I'm sorry, a subsequent con speaker that would like to speak to this resolution, please raise your hand. I'll try to prioritize students who haven't had a chance to speak yet or are not from New Jersey. Shout out to all of you from New Jersey who have done a great job speaking, but I'll try to maybe pick from a different region so we can get a good diverse perspective. So Samantha Waldrop, I'm going to come to you for a con speech on this topic. Samantha, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, cool. So my chapter at Shasta High School in Northern California, we actually did a thought talk on this a few weeks ago, and kind of the conclusion that we all kind of agreed on in the end was that specifically with the school walkouts, I think we definitely made the point of when it is either organized by the school, organized by ASB or student government, the organization really has to be nonpartisan and non-biased. So as far as the protests go, so for our school, we did have a 17-minute moment of silence. We had a walkout, but it was in comparison to some other schools, it was like way contrastedly different because there were no signs, there was no chanting, there was no speaking at all, pretty much. And so with our school walkout, we had the advantage of not having to politicize something that was meant for respect for the victims that had passed away in Parkland. And so I think if it is an organization, if it is organized by the students and not by the school, then I would support it in saying that, if it has no ties to the school and if it is a public school or a private school, then, completely go ahead. And then I think another thing that we ended up agreeing on was that most of these protests and walkouts and like the hashtag neveragain movement, a lot of the signs I've been seeing, we had a local protest on one of the bridges, the glass bridges in my hometown. And I think one of the main things that I definitely noticed was all of the signs seemed to have some form of rhetoric that would not appeal to someone who supported the Second Amendment. And so I saw a lot of signs like, I don't like guns, guns should be banned, rhetoric along those lines. And so I think if you are trying to further, your cause with gun control, I don't think it's effective to go around chanting and holding signs that would definitely not align with the views of people who agree with the Second Amendment and don't want to, alter it in any way. With that, I'll yield my time to the chair. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Samantha. I think that was a great point that you raised. And we're going to try to squeeze in, I think, one more subsequent on both sides of the issue. I think this is when we want to spend a little bit of time, and we'll still try to wrap up on time if we can, but maybe we'll go just a few minutes over. So do I have anybody that wants to speak? Oh, sorry, I'm going to put everybody's hands down to reset. Is there anybody that wants to speak pro on this resolution? Folks that haven't had a chance to speak yet. Matthew, I know you're from New Jersey, but I'm gonna come to you since we didn't get to hear from you before. Matthew, are you there?
Yes, are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, yep.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about our walkout a little bit and like how it went. I thought it was very effective because, all right, so one of the points brought up by one of the main speakers was that, they thought we're not talking directly to our representatives. However, that's just not true. At my walkout, we had stations set up so that way people could write directly to their representatives in Congress. And, through our walkout, we also registered people to vote. And that absolutely is an effective form of activism. You see, when you register people to vote and you talk directly to your congressman or congresswoman, your voice is being heard. And walkouts have historically been proven to be effective forms of activism. In Vietnam, for example, students all around the country, they walked out. And, eventually the United States pulled out of Vietnam. In Birmingham, Alabama, students as young as 8 or 9 years old walked out of school, and while schools eventually became segregated. So, it's not that they're ineffective. They absolutely are effective. Even this current walkout, for example, here in New Jersey, today, 6 laws were passed in our assembly, basically to try and improve our gun control laws. Where Marco Rubio, even though his views on gun control are still not exactly what I would want to be done, he has improved his stance a little bit since Parkland. So it's not that they're ineffective. They absolutely are effective. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that those were really great points to bring us back to activism and what that entails and what that means. So thank you for that. And we need a main con on this still? Yes? Do we have any, or not a main con, but a subsequent con? Is there anybody that wants to wrap us up on this topic and speak con? Any con speakers? Otherwise, we can go back to the main debaters. Yep. Shaki? Shaki, I'm coming back to you.
Hello, I'm back once again. My name is Shaki. So I believe that the march and what's going on in America is the best form of activism, because the fact is people are actually paying attention. I believe that the walkout and the march are raising awareness that would have never been raised prior to us doing this. My school actually got to do a walkout and I actually got to go to the march in New York City. And our school, basically, they asked us, try not to politicize it. And a lot of students didn't want to politicize it. But we had many students who, in our school, we didn't realize, who were truly politically aware of the issues that were going on in America at the time. And it just raised awareness. And our schools now really have a conversation. And students across our campus are saying, this is what we want, this is how we want it. And not just across our campus, across our town. We have multiple schools in our town. And all the schools are really coming together to say, this is what we want to do as a collective unit. So I believe that the walkout and like the Never Again movement is truly the best form of, protest and, activism at this time in 2018. And as we've seen, it's been useful. The civil rights movement, suffrage, things like that have used marches and stuff. And, these form of peaceful protests to show this is what we want and this is how we're going to raise our awareness. And I think it's just history repeating itself. I think it's truly going to be the best form of protest and best form of awareness and activism for many years to come. I yield my time to the chair.
Great, thanks. And Alex Walton, our main con speaker, we're going to come back to you to wrap us up. Alex, anything you'd like to address?
Yes. So clearly, JSA is always a great experience. I'm always encouraged by how bright you guys are. Truly, our country is going to be in good hands, even though people talk bad about millennials. But that's exactly the point. We have to understand that we're all in this together. So more so than the Never Again movement is just this horrible whatever. The principal challenge they have right now and what they should really focus on is making sure that the issue is not just gun control in terms of gun restrictions and limitations. It should be an end to gun violence. So there's various strata that was not mentioned that I think it would be appropriate that I should introduce. So, many of these mass shooters were on psychotropic drugs. I think like 34 of the last 35 were on psychotropic drugs. That's, the vast proliferation of all these medications to really young people in high school who are already stressed. So we know, like AP, or if you're an IB, some people know about that. It's really hard. We should not be adding drugs into the mix. A lot of these kids grew up in single-parent households. Now, single mothers are courageous and heroic, and we admire them all. but we also have to understand that there is probably some structural family effects that made them feel lesser than and not completely secure. That's something we also have to understand. So I would make mention of drugs, mental health. If we had gone some of these people involuntarily committed with respect to the background checks, most of these people had never committed a crime before. As was the case in Columbine, as my opposing speaker made, that man had never committed a crime in his life. He took a gun from his mother. So when we address background checks would not prevented Newtown. That guy didn't have he was never on, he never had he never committed a crime or anything, but he was crazy. And people knew he was crazy. He should have had a path to get involuntarily committed, or someone should have reported that. So I would just ask that the Never Again movement and every one of us, whether you're more on this side of you believe guns should be less restricted or they should be more restricted, we should all realize that the enemy that we have in common is just the mass shootings, and we should broaden our perspective to find the best solution. With that being said, I yield my time to the chair.
Okay, thank you so much. And Audrey Jo, we're going to come back to you for the last 1 minute of this resolution, and then we'll take a poll.
Okay. I urge you to vote pro on this resolution because the Never Again movement has united schools across the country on this singular issue, which I think is really important. It has kept gun control and reducing gun violence on the forefront of our nation's current political discussion. And as our subsequent speakers, the subsequent speakers said, these walkouts have been effective in keeping this in the limelight. And another said that it's encouraging more people to register to vote and write to their representatives, which is incredibly effective in changing current policies. The Never Again movement is forcing both the media and every American citizen, or like anyone on the internet, to pay attention to this issue and pay attention to the students who are speaking. Finally, reducing gun violence starts with reducing access to guns, and this Never Again movement is increasing awareness and convincing the American people that this is something that needs to be done, and for that, it's incredibly effective. I yield my time to the chair.
Great, thank you so much. That was a great discussion, everybody. I really appreciate your thoughtful comments and experiences that you've had as part of this movement. So, Stuart, let's put up a poll.
All right, the poll is up. Go ahead and cast your vote on where you fall on this resolution. We'll leave this up for about 30 seconds. 30 more seconds, rather. All right, 15 seconds.
Got really good voting participation happening, so that's great.
All right, now we're going to close it. Let's take a look. So it looks like the sweeping majority of you guys feel that youth demonstrations like the Never Again movement and the National School Walkout are an effective form of activism.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for that point. So we've covered our three main topics, and so we're running a little short or a little over on time, I guess, but I hope everybody can stick around for another 10 or 15 minutes as we transition to our last talking point.
All right. So as Evie mentioned, we discussed a lot of things as to, kind of tackling this issue from several different angles, and especially ending it on the note of activism. And as we know, JSA is kind of a dual system in which we integrate debate and activism to make ourselves more involved in our community. So what we're all asking you to do is kind of just brainstorm ways as to how you can further or foster this sort of healthy conversation in your communities to see that change actually does happen. I know someone else mentioned it, how, it only takes one person or one great movement in a generation to really spark change. So we just want to get your opinion as to what can we do from here, because in a few days time the media trucks will roll out, but the issue we want to make sure is not one that's perennial.
So I'll try to call on folks that haven't been called on. So if you want to speak to this, what's the role of JSA? What can we do? Where do we go from here? I'm happy to take as many comments as we have. So TJ Walker, I'm coming to you. I'm happy to have you on the webinar. So excited to hear what you have to say, TJ.
Hi. So I think personally the first step is going chapter by chapter and really discussing the issues within each chapter, because I personally remember at the Northeast State Winter Congress a few weeks ago, we actually talked about we talked a lot about fighting apathy, and I think that the first step to doing that is really on the base level, which is the chapter. So yeah, that's all I really have to say.
Great, thanks, TJ. Let's see. Melanie Louch, I'm coming to you next. Melanie?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. So in addition to being in JSA, I am also a member of the Working Group on Girls, which is affiliated with the United Nations. And one of the things that they teach a lot of their young members is that you are the expert on your own story. Basically saying that you may not have all the answers to everything that there is to know on, in this case, gun control or something like that, but you know how it affects your life and you can share your story in hopes of changing something. So I know that in my community, we have actually had school shootings where I live. I'm from San Marcos. There was this attempted shooting at a middle school a few years ago. And I know that if we share our experiences, people might listen. It's similar to what the Parkland kids are doing. And I think if more of us did that, we could have a huge impact on possible legislation or even just getting our communities involved. And I also want to point out, for those of you who aren't aware, March for Our Lives is actually doing an additional thing on April 7th called Town Hall for Our Lives, and they're encouraging students in every congressional district to call on a town hall with their representative and talk about issues that matter to young people in your area. So if that's something that your JSA chapter wants to do as like an activism thing, that might be something worth looking into. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie. That's a great point. Dev Patel, I'm going to come to you next, and then Ariana Kretz, I'm going to come to you after Dev. So, Dev, can you hear us?
Hey there, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So I think JSA is doing a great job on a national level as far as getting these students involved in their communities and creating and fostering this interest. It's now just a matter of organizing events at a state level so that these children have the opportunity to go out and promote their own ideas as far as what they believe in. And I think that all starts with statewide activism initiatives. And if we put more emphasis on this area for every individual state and make that one of our national goals, I think it's going to make a huge difference as far as the impact that our JSA students can have on the community.
Great. That's a really good point, Dev. Thanks. Ariana, I'm going to come to you, and then Pedro, you're going to come after that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Ariana? Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so my name's Ariana. I am from SoCal. I'm a director of political activism for our state, and I think what JSA does an excellent job on doing is fostering civil discourse and doing events like this. And that's really as far as we can take it on a national or state level without picking a side and remaining nonpartisan. But what I think we do need to work on is, as the previous speaker just said, connecting students with opportunities outside of JSA to get more involved wherever they stand on this issue. In SoCal, we've just created an activism match program where you can submit a survey based on your interests and your time commitments and all that, and we'll link you with opportunities, whether that be interning for politician or working with a specific organization. And I think that's really something we need to expand upon, especially on the chapter level, because the most change really does come from the smallest groups. And it's most effective when you have one concentrated body going at an issue. So I think, just to conclude, I think JSA can improve on connecting students directly with outside organizations to get more involved with this movement.
Great, thank you so much. Pedro Oliveira, I'm coming to you next, and then Zachary Roberts, you'll be our next comment. Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Yeah, I'm Pedro Oliveira. I'm from South Florida, ironically. Yeah, as we were talking about political activism and how students and teens go out and march and talk about their views and points about gun control and stuff like that. I do believe that this sliver of political activism that's been portrayed in several media outlets is vital and beneficial per se for activism and a revolution. If we look back into several aspects of history, as we all know of Martin Luther King, he started up his own revolution with his own voice and his own beliefs and contradicting the institutional racism that's going on in the country. And with his small group, his church, his community, he started up, as we all know of the March on Washington, 300,000 people, black and white, came together and rebutted the system. And so I feel like as not all of us, but most of us who are minors and can't vote into legislation, laws, and political figures, we do have a voice. And I feel like our First Amendment right to speak freely about a given issue is detrimental for political activism. And so as me, I'm 16, so I can't vote into anything, but I live in Southern Florida, so it's a very conservative town. And so my school, there was about 20 people who walked out, which is surprisingly. We see kids in New York, of course, and California, all these schools, the whole school goes out and protests. And so I feel like that if you really want to participate in these things, we should contact local representatives, talk to, intern. I know there's an intern at United Nations in New York. There's just several things you can be involved in. And just because you're 16 doesn't mean you're not competent enough to be involved in this type of stuff. So I do think that your voice is a huge tool for political activism, and it's the most powerful tool, actually. So I yield all my time to the chair. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Zachary, we're going to come to you, and then I think we're going to wrap up this discussion in this thought talk for the night. So Zachary.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Zach again, from Northeast. I would like to say that JSA has so much power in our hands, and we don't often realize it. We're a national organization that can meet just like this through the internet. And we get to share our voices in a civil discourse without it breaking into a fight. And we talk about all these, we have so many great leaders and great people in this organization. And together we can get our voices out there and help make change. It's not because we're not old enough to vote or just a few of us are 18 that we cannot heavily impact the world around us, but we also must realize that not everyone is in JSA, and that's okay because we can help them get their voices out too. I have many friends who are not in JSA that attended the March for Our Lives in Boston, and JSA can help get such ideas of activism promoting civil engagement and fighting apathy throughout all the people we know through our schools, through our communities. And by working together, we can, as an organization, work together to really help improve our government. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And Stuart, we're going to come back over to you.
All right, guys. So to wrap up, we've just got a couple of additional polls just to get a little more information about your chapters and kind of how you heard about this. So we actually had a previous speaker that mentioned having these topics in our local chapters and making sure that we are continuing these conversations outside of this webinar. So we're kind of interested in, has your JSA chapter discussed this topic, whether it's the Me Too movement, or the shootings.
The Never Again movement.
Right. I'm sorry.
Me Too is a separate night thought talk. But if you're in a JSA chapter, has your chapter participated in discussions similar to this one? We want to know what your chapters are talking about. So if you could take that poll.
All right. Close this, and it looks like we've got about 75%, which that's great. It's great to hear that our local chapters are having these discussions and fostering that discourse. And the last question we have for you guys, how did you hear about this webinar? Was it from a JSA, or was it from the email that JSA sent out? Was it from a cabinet member, social media, your chapter president or teacher advisor, or maybe it was just a friend in JSA who mentioned it to you?
This will help us to gauge how we can better promote online series and thought talks and debates like this in the future. So it'll help us to know what's the best effective communication tool to use when we're trying to reach as many JSA students as we can.
Awesome. And outside of this, if there's any other feedback, so we've kind of got limits to the questions that we can ask just through the technology. But if there's any ways that you think that these could be improved, or maybe you have an idea for a future national webinar, you can email us that information too. Just reach out to us, go to the JSA website, email Elizabeth, myself, any of the student leaders that you know of. Just get out that information and we'd be happy to hear it.
Great. I'll let Nick and Ambika wrap us up in just a minute, but I wanted to say thank you for spending part of your evening with us in this really timely and important discussion. One of JSA's values and that we have as an organization is empowerment. And I hope that you all come away from tonight feeling that sense of student empowerment, that voicing your opinion, that hearing from others that may disagree with you is empowering. And I encourage you to go out and continue to have those discussions and those dialogues with your peers, and continue to be involved in JSA while you can, and carry that spirit on once you leave us. You don't just end your time in JSA after high school, but hopefully the values and the leadership skills and training that you gain here, you take with you into your adult life. So again, I hope and encourage you to continue to be part of these conversations and so many important other ones that are happening in our time right now as well. So I'll let Nick and Ambika wrap us up, and that'll be it for tonight. So thanks everybody. I appreciate your time.
I'll wrap up a little bit. I definitely think I'm so glad that all of you guys came out and voiced your opinion. I think it's really great to have such a wide array of perspectives and have so many good, eloquent speeches from all of you guys. So I really appreciate all of you guys coming out tonight. What I will say is kind of what Stu was saying on feedback. Definitely don't be afraid to reach out to cabinet members, reach out to your governor or lieutenant governor, whoever it is that you can reach out to, and share your feedback on the state and on activism and how you can see your state or national JSA doing better in terms of activism and really empowering JSAers and the youth to engage in these kind of discussions and activities. Because like a lot of you guys said in your speeches, a small differences in individuals, that's what makes the difference. So if every one of you guys had an idea and willing to share it with someone in JSA, someone who could help you make that reality, definitely don't be afraid to do that. And definitely keep engaging in these conversations and making sure your voice is being heard, because it's incredibly impactful, and we're all here to hear and listen to you. So yeah, I'll pass on to Ambika.
All right, thank you. I just want to say kind of what has been said in the past 5 minutes, that I think the debate and the discussion throughout these 3 resolves was extremely mature And I know a lot of people tend to have sort of disdain for other people in terms of opposing views and don't even seem to listen. But I saw so many opportunities for individuals to really come up and capitalize off of respectfully disagreeing off of someone else's idea or position, and they took it. And so, similar to what Nick said, if you know you're in JSA and you want to find a way to put yourself out there, let JSA be the medium for you to do it, because you have this amazing institution at your disposal. Make the most of it, because you're only as strong as this movement is only as strong as those who are part of it. So if you want to make a difference, you want to be the people, just keep on sticking to what JSA can give you.
And with that, we will close for the evening. So thank you all so much for your time. There were a couple people that asked for some resources and some links to things. So we'll be sure to follow up with an email, a short survey about tonight's webinar and some of the resources that you asked us for in the next day or two. So check your emails for those items coming through to your inbox in the next couple of days. And again, thanks for taking part of your night to spend with us in this very important discussion. And hopefully we see you on the next one. And thank you, Nick and Ambika, for being such great moderators and hosts.
Thank you. See you guys next time.
Have a good night, everybody.